The smell of roasted chicken filled the house as I walked through the front door of my childhood home. It was Sunday, which meant mandatory family dinner, a tradition my mother had maintained with ironclad determination since Dad died 3 years ago. I juggled my laptop bag and a bottle of wine, already mentally preparing myself for the usual interrogation about my love life and career choices. "Marcus, you're late," my sister Vanessa called from the kitchen, her voice dripping with that particular brand of condescension she'd perfected over 32 years. "Traffic was murder," I replied, setting the wine on the counter. At 29, I was the baby of the family, the one who'd supposedly never quite measured up to Vanessa's accomplishments. Her doctor husband, her 2 perfect children, her sprawling house in the suburbs. According to YouTube analytics, 99.6% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. Mom emerged from the dining room, wiping her hands on her apron. "Well, you're here now. That's what matters. Vanessa, check on the potatoes, would you?" I needed to use the bathroom, so I headed down the hallway. But as I passed Dad's old study, the room Mom kept locked and preserved like a shrine, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. Light spilled out from the crack. Curiosity got the better of me. Dad's study had been off-limits since his death, a sacred space Mom claimed she couldn't bear to change. I pushed the door open quietly. What I saw made my blood freeze in my veins. Mom and Vanessa were hunched over Dad's old mahogany desk, papers spread everywhere. But it wasn't just papers, it was legal documents. And Vanessa was carefully tracing something, her hand moving with deliberate precision. "Make sure the tail on the M curves more," Mom whispered, holding up a reference sheet. "Marcus always does that little flourish." My signature. They were practicing my signature. I stood there, paralyzed, watching through the crack as my sister completed another forgery. This one apparently satisfactory because Mom nodded approvingly. She picked up the document. From where I stood, I could make out the letterhead of Whitmore and Associates, Dad's estate lawyers. "This should do it," Mom said, her voice carrying none of the warmth she'd greeted me with moments ago. "Once we submit this with Marcus's signature, the trust fund transfers to us. He'll never even know it existed." "Are you sure he doesn't know about it?" Vanessa asked, flexing her hand. "Dad might have told him." "Your father set it up specifically for Marcus during his last months, but the paperwork wasn't finalized before he passed. I found the documents after." Mom's voice was cold, calculated. "The lawyer said if we can provide documentation showing Marcus's acknowledgement and his agreement to the alternative distribution, which we now have thanks to your artistic skills, the funds can be redirected according to the family's needs." "You mean our needs," Vanessa laughed. "God knows Marcus would just waste it on his silly tech startup dreams." "At least we'll put it to good use. Daniel and I have been looking at that vacation property in Aspen." "And I can finally renovate the kitchen," Mom added. The amount they mentioned made my head spin. $500,000. $500,000 that Dad had set aside for me, probably knowing I'd need capital to start my own business, probably his way of believing in me when no one else did. And they were stealing it. I backed away silently, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. I made it to the bathroom, shut the door, and braced myself against the sink. The face staring back at me in the mirror looked pale, shocked, betrayed. For several minutes, I just stood there, trying to process what I'd witnessed. These were the 2 people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. My mother, who'd raised me. My sister, who I'd looked up to my entire childhood despite her constant criticisms. By the time I emerged, they were back in the kitchen, all smiles and domesticity. "There you are," Mom said brightly. "I was about to send a search party. Dinner's ready." I sat through that meal in a haze. Every smile felt like a knife. Every "How was your week, honey?" felt like a slap. They asked about my software development job, made the usual comments about how I should be thinking about settling down, starting a family. Vanessa bragged about her daughter's piano recital. Mom mentioned she was thinking about redoing the kitchen. "Oh, really?" I said, my voice carefully neutral. "That sounds expensive." "I've been saving," Mom said without missing a beat. "Besides, I deserve to treat myself after all these years." With my money, I thought bitterly. With the money Dad left for me. I left early, claiming an early morning meeting. As I drove home to my modest apartment, rage began to replace the shock. This wasn't just about money, though $500,000 would change my life. This was about the casual cruelty of it, the ease with which they decided to rob me, the practiced nature of their deception. That night, I barely slept. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to beg or plead or ask them how they could do this to me. I was going to beat them at their own game. First, I called Whitmore and Associates and asked to speak with the attorney handling my father's estate. I'd met him once at the funeral, a serious man named Gregory Chen. "Mr. Whitmore, this is Marcus Peterson, Robert Peterson's son." "Marcus, yes. How can I help you?" "I wanted to check on the status of my father's estate. I understand there might be some outstanding matters regarding a trust fund." There was a pause. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details over the phone, but yes, there are some final documents that need to be processed. We've actually been waiting on some paperwork from your mother." "I'd like to come in and review everything personally," I said. "Would tomorrow work?" "Of course. Let me check the calendar. Yes, I can see. You at 2 p.m. Next, I called an old friend from college, Jennifer Wu, who'd gone on to become a forensic document examiner. Over coffee, I explained the situation carefully. "You need to be absolutely sure about this, Marcus," she warned. "Accusing family members of forgery is serious business." "I saw them with my own eyes," I said. "I need evidence that will hold up if this goes legal." She nodded slowly. "If they submit documents with your forged signature, I can examine them. But you'll need to get me samples of the forgeries somehow, and I'll need your actual signature samples for comparison." The plan began to take shape in my mind. I would let them think they'd succeeded, let them submit the forged documents, and then I would expose them. Over the next 2 weeks, I played my part perfectly. Sunday dinners continued. I smiled, I chatted, I pretended everything was normal. Meanwhile, I met with Gregory Chen and learned the full extent of Dad's gift to me. The trust fund was substantial, exactly $500,000, meant to vest to me on my 30th birthday, which was 3 months away. However, there was a clause that allowed for early distribution if all parties agreed, and I signed specific documentation. The forged documents my mother and sister were preparing would claim I wanted to disclaim my interest in the trust, allowing it to be distributed to the family instead, meaning Mom and Vanessa. "Has my mother submitted any paperwork yet?" I asked. "Not yet," Gregory said, "but she called last week saying it would be coming soon. When it does, I need you to call me immediately before processing anything. And I mean immediately, before you do anything with it." He looked at me curiously, but agreed. I also provided him with multiple samples of my genuine signature and explained that I had reason to believe fraud might be attempted. His expression grew grave. "That's a serious allegation, Marcus." "I know. That's why I need to be absolutely certain before we proceed." The call came on a Tuesday. "Marcus, it's Gregory Chen. Your mother just submitted the trust disclaimer documents. They have what appears to be your signature. Don't process them, I said. I'm coming in right now with a specialist. Jennifer met me at the law office. Gregory presented the documents, and I watched my sister's handiwork, my forged signature at the bottom of legal papers that would rob me of my inheritance. Jennifer photographed everything, examined the signatures under magnification, and finally nodded to me. "This is definitely forged," she said. "The pressure points are wrong, there's hesitation in several strokes, and under magnification, you can see pencil guidelines that were erased. I can provide a full forensic report." Gregory Chen looked genuinely shocked. "Mrs. Peterson committed forgery?" "With my sister's assistance," I confirmed. "I witnessed them practicing my signature. I need to know my legal options." What followed was a conference with the COR's firm's senior partner and eventually a decision to involve law enforcement. Forgery of this magnitude, especially involving legal documents and inheritance fraud, was a criminal matter. It wasn't enough to simply refuse the documents. What they'd done was a crime. The hardest part was waiting. The police needed to build their case. Jennifer provided her forensic analysis. I gave my statement about what I'd witnessed. They interviewed Gregory Chen and examined the documents. They even checked Mom's house records and found the practice sheets Vanessa had used, carelessly left in a folder in Dad's study. It took 3 weeks, 3 more Sunday dinners, where I sat across from my mother and sister, knowing what was coming, watching them exchange satisfied glances, seeing Mom browse kitchen renovation magazines. Finally, Detective Sarah Martinez called me. "We're making the arrests tomorrow morning. I wanted to give you a heads up." That night, I didn't sleep at all. The news came through Vanessa's husband, Daniel. He called me at 9 a.m., his voice frantic. "Marcus, something's happened. Vanessa was arrested this morning. Your mother, too. They're saying something about forgery and fraud. This has to be a mistake." "It's not a mistake," I said quietly. Silence. Then, "You knew about this?" "I watched them do it, Daniel. They forged my signature to steal my inheritance. $500,000 that Dad left specifically for me." "Jesus Christ." His voice was barely a whisper. "What's going to happen?" "That depends on a lot of things, but they committed a serious crime." The fallout was spectacular. Mom's friends from church found out. Vanessa's social circle buzzed with the scandal. The legal process ground forward, criminal charges for forgery, fraud, and attempted theft. Civil litigation for the trust fund dispute, though that was quickly resolved when they couldn't produce any legitimate claim. But the real revenge wasn't in the legal consequences or even in securing my inheritance. It was in the phone calls that started coming. First, it was my mother, calling from her lawyer's office. "Marcus, please. We can work this out. We're family." "You stopped treating me like family when you decided to rob me," I replied. "I'm your mother. How can you do this to me?" "How could you do it to me?" I countered. "How could you look me in the eye every Sunday and smile while planning to steal from me, while using my own father's memory as cover?" She had no answer to that. Vanessa's call was different. She was angry. "You're destroying our family over money. Do you know what this is doing to my children? They're hearing about this at school." "Then maybe you should have thought about your children before you committed fraud," I said. "You could have just asked me for help if you needed money that badly. Instead, you and Mom decided I was too stupid or too insignificant to deserve what Dad left me." "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that. I heard. You, Vanessa. I heard you laugh about how I just wasted on my silly tech startup dreams. I heard you planning your Aspen vacation with my money." She started crying then, but I felt nothing. The sister I'd loved and looked up to had revealed herself to be a stranger, someone who valued money more than her own brother. The criminal case proceeded. In the end, faced with overwhelming evidence and Jennifer's expert testimony, both Mom and Vanessa took plea deals. They avoided prison time but received probation, hefty fines, and had to perform community service. More importantly, they were required to attend counseling and pay restitution, though what they were really repaying wasn't the money they'd failed to steal, but the legal costs their crime had created. The trust fund came to me as Dad had intended. I used it to start my tech company, developing accessibility software for people with disabilities. Within 18 months, we'd landed our first major contract. Dad would have been proud. I didn't speak to my mother or sister for 6 months. I spent Thanksgiving alone that year, Christmas too. People told me I was being too harsh, that I should forgive them. "They're family," everyone said. But here's what I learned. Being family doesn't give you a license to betray someone. It actually makes the betrayal worse. They didn't just try to steal money from me, they tried to steal my father's last gift, his final expression of belief in me and my dreams. They tried to steal the future he'd wanted for me. Eventually, my mother reached out, not with excuses or justifications, but with something that resembled genuine remorse. "I was wrong," she said. "I was bitter about how much your father had set aside for you when I felt like I'd sacrificed so much. I convinced myself I deserved it more. I convinced Vanessa of that too. But I was wrong, Marcus. I was horribly, terribly wrong." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. Vanessa took longer. Her marriage nearly fell apart under the strain. Daniel had been humiliated by his wife's criminal behavior. She lost friends, lost face in her social circles. She had to explain to her children why Grandma and Mommy had done something wrong. The consequences rippled through her life in ways she'd never anticipated. When she finally called me, a year after the arrests, her voice was different, smaller. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did to you. Not just the legal stuff, the betrayal. I destroyed your trust. I destroyed what we had. And I'm sorry." "Why did you do it?" I asked. "Why was it so easy?" She was quiet for a long time. "Because I'd spent so long thinking of you as less than me. Little brother who couldn't get his life together, who was chasing pipe dreams while I had the perfect life. It was easy to justify taking from someone I'd already decided was lesser. It's the ugliest thing I've ever learned about myself." That conversation didn't fix everything. Trust, once shattered so completely, doesn't simply restore itself. But it was honest in a way our relationship had never been before. My company grew. We hired our 10th employee, then our 20th. The software we developed started making a real difference for people. I met someone, a brilliant programmer named Alex, who got excited about the same problems I did. Life moved forward. I eventually agreed to occasional family dinners, though they were awkward, careful affairs. Mom and Vanessa were tentative around me, walking on eggshells. Sometimes I felt guilty about that. Most times I remembered that night in Dad's study, their voices casual and cold as they plotted to rob me. The inheritance Dad left me became more than just seed money for a business. It became a line in the sand, a moment where I chose myself over false peace. It became the foundation not just of my company, but of my self-respect. On my 31st birthday, 1 year after I should have received the trust fund, the company landed a major contract that would triple our revenue. Alex and I celebrated with champagne in our tiny office. My phone buzzed with birthday messages, friends, colleagues, even Mom and Vanessa with their careful, guilt-laden wishes. But I thought about Dad, about how he'd known, somehow, that I'd need that money, that I'd need his belief in me when no one else could see what I saw. He'd given me more than money. He'd given me permission to dream big. And in trying to steal it, Mom and Vanessa had inadvertently given me something too. The clarity to see that sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. Sometimes it's about refusing to be destroyed. It's about standing up and saying, "No, I will not let you diminish me. I will not accept your version of who I am." The real revenge was building something beautiful with what they'd tried to take. The real revenge was succeeding, thriving, becoming exactly who Dad believed I could be. And maybe, someday, there might be real forgiveness, real reconciliation. But that was a gift they would have to earn, not something they could forge with practiced strokes and forged signatures.